leading Accenture Digital. Accenture Digital is basically a startup within a 470,000 people company that created 5 years back to do the things we were doing at scale completely different, right, for our clients. I'm running the practice here. Today already sits 60% of the business that Accenture does globally, so it's a $45 billion company that in 5 years rotated 60% the business we were doing before to the new, right? So yeah, delighted to be here. Thanks.
Fadi.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fadi Hindi. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Takaful Emarat. Takaful Emarat is an insurance company that's based on Islamic Sharia law, but we'll sell insurance to anybody, so it's not a problem. You know, come see me if you need insurance, please, right afterwards.
Thank you. Finally, we have Ankur Shah, who is fashionably late. And the reason he's...
Just in time.
Oh, just in time. No, we were waiting for you. He is fashionably late because they just did a $3.1 billion transaction with Uber, the largest in the region. He's...
Thank you, thank you.
Drinks are on you, I guess.
Yeah.
Team effort, so really appreciate it.
He's the CFO and the Chief Strategy Officer. Please introduce yourself. I've done your basic introduction.
So thanks for having me here. Apologies for being late. There's a lot of future ecosystem around here. I got confused, but really nice to be here. Thanks, Tariq.
Super.
So as Tariq mentioned, I've been the CFO and the Chief Strategy Officer for Careem, which is a ride-hailing and now kind of internet consumer platform in the region for the last kind of 4 or 5 years. And I've been associated with the organization and the founders for the last about 6 years or so, ever since we started.
So this is our 3 highly capable people. Salim is going to be helping me to moderate them now. I'm just joking, but
You didn't know that, did you?
I didn't know. No, we keep surprised. I mean, we keep you on the edge, literally. Fadi, I'd like to come to you because I think your industry was one of the industries up there which is being fundamentally disrupted and is ripe for that shift because of content, data, technology, AI. And Salim, please feel free to dive in. What are your key challenges and your thoughts on his challenges? Yes, sir.
The biggest challenges that were very obvious from the get-go were cultural, organizational, the immune system that Salim always talks about, which I picked up on from the book 3 or 4 years ago when I first read it, as well as running through the sprint. So we knew that we had to address those things. And again, based on the interest of the audience, I could spend a lot of time talking about these things. But really, I'll tell you the biggest challenges that we're facing right now is that as we've transformed and have become more exponential as an organization, we're beginning to face the regulatory challenges and the ability to bring about products and services that we actually have ready and ready to scale, but you really cannot bring them forward until the regulatory framework is in place. And we're kind of working with the regulators on a lot of these things that we want to do.
I think this is the big challenge now with a lot of industries where the product might be cutting edge, but the regulatory structure just simply doesn't deal with it and can't. And therefore, you either get stuck dealing with that, and the minute you have regulatory issues, the investors disappear because nobody wants to have to wait long enough, an arbitrarily long time for that to happen, which was the failure of Shah Agassi trying to do Better Place. It was phenomenal technology, but you needed government participation, and the whole thing just died away in a sense. So this is an enormous challenge. The way we think about it is start going into areas that are less regulated and wait for the regulation to catch up, or just break the law deliberately. Which is
we thought about that, but we decided, since we're a publicly listed company, we decided not to do that.
Maybe
but I have to say that the regulators are actually very futuristic and innovative in their thinking. But the reality is things just take time. Yeah. So we just have to work through that. But we've kind of pivoted towards that, looking at existing products that are already there. How can we make sure that we get that distributed 100% digitally?
But do they have time, Xavier? You are advisor to a lot of companies like them. Does the insurance company actually have time with all the new, the new innovations that are coming through?
Well, the reality is that the obvious answer is no. There's no time because, as exponential technology says, the moment you are 1 minute late, the next one has already went twice that distance, right? So time is of the essence. Said that, one of the key challenges we face in our clients is what technologies to adopt when, right? Because the how, the vision, you said we have regulators that are very visionary, but then bringing the how, implementing this vision into reality, this is where the core of the success or the failure resides.
I mean, my key thing about the insurance people is that they're just too slow to move. They're just defending the tsunami that's actually coming at them. And I see other industries there too, and they are, to me, a proxy for what's going on. When you look at this kind of stuff, and you've been breaking all the rules of the game in the most positive way, how do you keep adaptable? How do you keep nimble? How do you compete with the monopolists?
In the transport sector, with respect to regulation, it has been a regulated sector in that in most cities around the world, the taxis are the sort of the protected, regulated sector, right? There's some medallions that are licensed by the government for a fee. That's how the government makes its revenue, sets the prices. Taxis may or may not follow those prices. There's a street price and a metered price. And the quality of service is, again, dependent on the city, poor to reasonable. Yeah. I think the great innovation that Lyft and Uber began with Sidecar in 2007, 2008 was to try to provide these services over technology. And that was a gap in the regulation that allowed the service to expand. And of course, it coincided with the availability of data plans on smartphones and GPS and so on and so forth. By the time the regulator woke up, it was too late.
How would you destroy an Uber equivalent business?
You would do it through technology, because if that industry is adopting technology quickly enough, then they can keep up with the pace. So the question is, can the industry adopt the technology, or does it get disrupted from the outside? The way to do it today is what the companies are doing is they have their core capability of ride sharing, ride hailing, etc. They set up an edge organization that is embracing the technology, building totally in a different way. Over time, that becomes the new gravity center.
I just want to make sure that that I'm clear about the fact that we've actually disrupted ourselves, and we're hopefully on our way to disrupt insurance in the UAE. We've taken 220 people, and I've just dumped them in the middle of one big massive sprint for the whole organization, and we transformed in about five months. And then, I mean, it's not 100%, but it was such a shock to the system to where we destroyed any immunity that was there. There are some backlash, but once that was done, and we have the right culture and the right ExO thinking that the organization had, then we went after things like artificial intelligence, platforms, robotics. Once the mindset was right, and we had the people all thinking in terms of digital and scale, like the scale and the ideas parts of kind of the ExO attributes, the sky is the limit.
Just building on this, one common denominator across is data. Because before, a lot of the things we're doing based on intentions or factual, but now you're getting data specific on every single transaction, every single element of how you operate and how the customers behave, and then you can anticipate that.
I'd like to come back to Ankur again in terms of how you built scale. Over the last 5 years, you came from 0 to 90,000 drivers, and just the sheer speed of doing that and the building of that scale while all of these issues were there around you, regulatory issues and so on. What's the process? How did you do it?
So I guess our business is a marketplace in that we're connecting users with service providers, and so as you launch a new city, you really have operations on the ground that seek to balance this marketplace every day as you go along. Now, initially, when you start out, no one believes that demand will show up through the phone. And the traditional suppliers or service providers are used to renting out vehicles for a day at a time, or are on a monthly salary with some fleet somewhere. And so initially, we have to guarantee that monthly income for a certain number of hours per day, so long as the service provider's application is open for a certain period of time and accepts bookings at a certain rate, right? So that allows the service provider to participate in the business. And then our goal is to drive enough demand to the service provider that we no longer have to pay that guarantee. And in that way, we're changing the business model of the fleet provider from a fixed salary to a floating salary, or a floating commission, where they're able to make even more than they were making on a fixed salary, and the incentive drives the quality. So, once that demand-supply loop begins, it starts to snowball as more and more people hear about the income-generating opportunity, and consequently, the ETAs, or the estimated time of arrival of the car, goes down, and more people start to then ride because it becomes a more and more convenient solution. And ultimately, over time, you should be able to replace the cost of your private vehicle, because it's sitting unutilized for 22 hours of the day, with the cost of the ride in some markets. In regulated markets like Dubai, obviously, that's not yet possible.
Thank you. You are a $45 billion company. And over the last 2, 3, 4 years, as you'd mentioned recently, over 60% of your business is now digital in nature. What was that process? How did it transform like that? And what is your advice to people who should also have 60% of their business to be digital in nature?
Yeah. So it's a combination of things, but first of all, I think a very strong leadership. So it really starts from the top and say, look, a lot of things are happening, and we are advising the global Fortune 1000 companies, and we need to be the ones that walk the talk first. And we set up for ourselves very specific targets. We first, things that were changing, cloud. So today we are 90x% of our business in the cloud. And he said, we cannot sell cloud. We are one of the largest service providers and service managers on cloud services. And we said, we need to be the ones adopting and suffering from it. And I mentioned this last part, suffering from it. Because then we help the Microsofts, the Amazons, and so on to fine-tune, and then be able to do it, go to market together. So another thing, artificial intelligence. We have a massive business process outsourcing business in India. 120,000 people only doing that globally for financial institution, insurance, and so on. One of the things we are being pressed every year is reduce the cost to serve, your marginal cost, right? Every year we want our clients want a lower fee. Then what's the way? First, automation. Everything that can be automated needs to be automated. So bringing data at the core, and two, create AI bots, and we created over these 120,000, 40,000 people, jobs were automated. Very strong top leadership view that we make it public and available, and we report every quarter on that, and then two, internally transform ourselves.
Let me throw a data point to you, a controversial one, and Salim, request your comment on that. There's a Forbes study that over 80% of digital transformation fails. So over 80% of what they do is crap. In other words, it's going to fail. And digital transformation is failing.
Failing fast.
Well, failing fast, but it's failing because the people issues, or whatever the issues are. But is digital transformation, can it succeed, and are the organizations ready to accept them? What do we need to do? Because
discipline of doing this is very hard. It's really hard to say we're going to disrupt ourselves. It's one of the hardest things. I think the core of leadership today and in the future is the willingness and the discipline to say we're going to eat our own dog food, and we'll eat our own children. We will cannibalize our own business, right? Jeff Bezos has demonstrated this. He's got a book business that's incredibly successful, and he goes, I'm launching the Kindle, and I'm going to cannibalize it because it's got to be, if you don't disrupt yourself, somebody else is disrupting you. It's just that simple. And the discipline and the courage to be able to do that is going to be one of the hallmarks of leadership in the future. When you say digital transformation fails 80% of the time, the stat is most big business model transformation projects that go towards 80% of them do fail. And the reason is they take a very long time. They're hugely complex. You get a ton of politics involved in it. And it's almost destined to failure because of the long-term nature of it. The results show up at the end, and the discipline to keep it going over that time when you're being attacked by the immune system nonstop.
Great answer. Thank you for that story. I have another thesis, and perhaps you guys can comment on that, is that we are very quick in signing a check for technology or for cloud or for services or for consultants, but very, very slow in signing for people, for training, for their cultural shifts and so on. So on the one hand, things are growing exponentially, and on the other hand, the people are not being trained, because now we're not training people for product. We're training people for softer skills, which are much, much more difficult to do, takes longer, and is more complex. So that's probably one of the other reasons.
Correct. And as you're saying that you need to change your program every X months because it needs to be agile. There's not the good news is that retraining is needed. The bad news is that you need to invest constantly on it. Yeah.
Well, I think if you look at Fadi's experience, a radical wholesale transformation is what's required, right? It either takes very visionary leadership or total market failure.
Correct.
And the only two successes of radical global transformation were IBM and Apple, and only because they were within a quarter of running out of money and they had the right leadership, right? And those two combined had them transform the company, but otherwise it doesn't happen.
Yeah. I'd like to ask the prettiest girl in town, you, I'm talking about you. In other words, you've suddenly grown up in terms of being a maverick, young, energetic company that was doing crazy stuff in terms of your marketing, positioning, and so on, and suddenly you have to be more mature because you've got a larger organization overlooking you. I'm just guessing, I may be wrong. How do you manage that shift, and what do you think is next for you as a company, but also other companies that get into a more mature environment? How do you retrain your people going forward? As the CFO, as head of strategy, what are you telling people now and say, everything is the same, nothing shifts?
So I think, of course, the transaction hasn't closed yet, so everything is the same. But I think the question is still valid in that, it's fascinating to hear something I had no idea about. And there are some parallels in that, our systems and processes that we designed in year one are, of course, not relevant in year 1.5. And those that we designed in year 1.5 are not relevant in year 2 because the growth has been sort of 10x every year. And so things that we were doing a certain way just don't work anymore, all the way from recruiting to setting up a new city or an accounting process or our network security process or our captain training process. Any process that you pick doesn't work 6 months later because the scale has overtaken it. And so there is a constant reinvention that's required that, of course, faces some resistance because I think naturally we're not designed to sort of think about and put in place stuff that we cannot see. And so even if we redesign a process, we're only redesigning for the capacity that we're lagging into at that point in time. And so you have to force yourself to design for 10x that capacity. And that is what really then kind of expands the horizon. So I don't think that is going to change. And I wonder whether companies like Amazon and Google and so on have been better at somewhat reinventing themselves compared to the IBMs and the Apples of the world.
The assessment we have there is because they were architected to be flexible from the bottom up. Google operates with small teams all over the shop, and they all have high amount of autonomy. And when you architect the bottom to be that way, the reason Facebook was so successful is that in any other company, Yahoo or MySpace, to get your feature, if you're a software developer, to get your feature live, you had to go to systems testing, integration testing, security testing, user ID testing, brand testing, and it took like 8 months to roll out a feature. Whereas Mark said to his developers, if you think you're live, go live. God help you if you're not ready, but go live if you want. And that's so empowering to a software developer that I can write a feature and just take it live on the site if I think it's ready. That they were rolling out features at 3 a week where everybody else was taking 8 months per feature. And that just totally wipes the market out if you can do that. And so when you architect from the bottom up that way, things become really powerfully embedded into the whole ecosystem that you're operating that way. You scale very quickly.
Salim, you were talking about startups versus organizations and how those organizations can then become exponential.
Right.
They're an advanced startup, they're a mature organization, you're advising people, both types of people. What are your thoughts on the failure rate of startups and still investing in that, because this whole environment is one of those things, versus organizations that can be transformed? And that's the work that EXO does.
Yeah, so what we found is, so just for people's benefit, if you're not familiar with the model, we looked at the 150 fastest growing companies and teased out what are the characteristics they were using. So Uber doesn't hire its own staff, or Careem doesn't hire its own staff. Google uses using algorithms. Airbnb is leveraging other people's assets. And so there's a whole market-facing set of externalities that can scale very quickly. And then a set of internal control structures, lean startup, decentralized organizations, social technologies to collaborate, etc. And we found that if you were a big company, if you fully implemented 4 out of those 10, you increased your effectiveness 10x. If you're a startup, you should be doing all of them, which is the scoring mechanism we have allows you to calibrate where you are on that metric. The way we've seen startups do it is to say use all of them, because if you're not, somebody else is. If you're a big company, the best structure we've seen is a big company appoints a chief exponential officer, and their job is to run projects on each of the 10 attributes in all of them. The harder challenge is taking a legacy organization and bringing it up to speed. That's the much higher order problem.
The thing about training, actually, thank you, because I wanted to highlight what we've, again, just humbly sharing our experience. We actually moved offices from where we used to be in Dera when I took over, and moved to Sheikh Zayed Road to a new office space where it's completely open. And I sit with the team on the floor. I don't have a suite. I don't have anything. You come in, you think I'm the office boy. And I dress like that usually. I'm just, today I try to dress up.
What's with the tie?
I don't know, man. I dressed up for you.
I see.
I dressed up too. Do you have any openings? The point was, in my mind, and again, this is, just humbly my thought process, fix the people first. You got to serve the people that serve your customer, per Tom Peters', golden nugget. So first, make sure that the people are, the structure is right. We flatten the structure, fix the pay scale, the job descriptions, all the things that people usually complain about. And then we've set a big training budget. We've taken a baseline of everybody's skills. Every single employee or team member we had was baselined, technically and behaviorally, and we've set targets for where they need to be by the end of the year. It's a lot of hard work. There's no easy way out. If you want to do cultural transformation, and if you really want to transform the organization, you got to commit to making the change. There's no other way. And we've set the targets for that, and then we've put one of the biggest training budgets probably, at least for a company our size. And by the way, when the market turned down was the time that I was more bullish about training. Then we made sure that there's a training center in the new facility, and we committed to making sure that that happens, and we just executed that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I'm going to stop.
Let me put an anecdote on your point. I think your company is really blessed to have you with this mindset about let's change ourselves from the leadership starting. We advise a very large bank in the region to do this, to transform completely into the new, because they are seeing the monsters coming, right? And basically the second day in the engagement, the CEO calls me, the group CEO, say, Xavi, we have a problem. I found today in the lift a couple guys in jeans, in t-shirts, and they told me they work in Accenture. We cannot work like this. And I said, yes, let's meet. We have another problem because I think you're not going to win this digital transformation. And this is how I started the conversation. So it all needs leadership, right? Leadership needs to be at the center of this mindset, right? And if that are going to be the break points of the discussion about what's relevant for the bank in the future, I think we need to start changing that. Otherwise, the rest is going to be history.
Great. Paul, please.
I would like to go 5 minutes back in the discussion that you had when you were talking about technology. You have to keep up with the technology because it's changing every 6 months and blah, blah, blah. That's all technology. That is platform. That is, we know that. But if you don't have right offerings to your client or to your client of the clients, then all those technology is worthless. So what are you doing to make that happen? So to get to that stage, people must trust you, people must love your service, and people are going to take that service. And therefore you have to scale. So how do you do that? How do you bring that I would say trust or that human touch to your end user?
Just 3 words: love your customers. So everything needs to be customer centric. We change internal to change the way we work into your customers. The thing is that we started changing us to be able to change how we work with them.
We've done customer journey mapping for all of our products by looking at all centered in design and empathy with the customer, identify all the pain points that the customer has.
Together with the end user?
We have done it with the end users, and of course, we have tens of thousands of customers, but we've done it with enough sample from across nationalities and across age groups, etc., to have the right empathetic understanding for why they struggle when they buy our product. And when we converted the digital, the experience to buy our health insurance online, the basic in 5 minutes and the comprehensive in 10 minutes, it was done all as a result of making sure that we either eliminate the friction points or we improve them. And customers just love dealing with our website and our chatbot because it was designed around them to anticipate what's the next thing that's coming.
What you measure is ultimately what you can improve, right? And it sounds like the dimensions of measure are quite similar: speed, cost, quality, and then of course you have your internal measure of kind of profitability, but you also have internal measures of quality and satisfaction and so on. And so we spend a lot of time measuring these things, and for us, of course, we can see the impact of changes we make to policy or process very, very quickly, and we're able to roll it out in a controlled manner, 0.01%, 0.1%, 1%, 10%, 50%, 100% across the network, and you're constantly getting feedback whether that change actually improves speed, cost, quality, or internal satisfaction, right? And then, so you can constantly do that. But I think just to come back to your original point, I don't think it's the technology that's changing every 6 months, and maybe that's the beginning, right? I think it's the customer's expectation that's changing every 6 months, for which you need to adapt your technology. You cannot start with the technology because then you're just a slave to some tool, and that has no meaning in the real world. But it's how the customer experiences your product that's changing every 6 months. Therefore, you need to change.
One industry that changes one experience affects other industries. So there's no longer the industry focus. So when you guys change the way, instead of paying cash, you can pay electronically, and you have so this has changed expectations of many other industries, and cash is becoming less and less a preference. So you're disrupting one way, you disrupt many other things that affect other industries, and this is where the multiplier happens as well.
Can we have 3 or 4 rapid questions, and then we'll request people to wrap up, please? So, okay. Edwin, quick question, and then Ajlan.
What about climate change? Or right now everything in the economic environment is around profits. It's around to be more efficient, but it's worthless if we don't have a planet that we can live in. We are supposed to have only like 12 years to change completely how economics works and our impact as society in the environment, and all the focus of the leaders is like profits and all of this, but it is worthless without a healthy planet.
Super.
Salim mentioned that one of the biggest problems that actually the companies are having is the immune ecosystem, and I think one of the reasons that I strongly believe is the matrix organizations. So basically, and metrics organizations are also feeding this subject matter expertise. So because there are people that they think, and they are, or they were at some point, expert on some areas, but since there's no end-to-end delivering teams, autonomous teams, actually they are becoming the bottleneck for all the decisions, and they're actually preventing the, all the innovation. How did you solve this?
What about the medical sector? You've been very quiet.
So, so I think the future is for us, because if you really look at other industries, our industry is one which has not been touched much. I'm the CEO for Astra Hospitals, so I think the future is coming on. Going to ask. My question is, especially for insurance and disruption. So I'll just be keeping quiet. So I'm sure unless and until you don't have an ecosystem developed, and what happens is all this disruption comes all of a sudden, and it takes off before the ground is totally prep. So I just want to know about that.
Yeah. So disruption in hospitals, immunity system. Environmental change. One quick word. Purpose was one of the words I wanted to use. Why aren't we talking about purpose here?
Okay, so we're talking about digitization, artificial intelligence, machine learning, everything. Humanity versus faith, how is it shifting? Are we going to be becoming creators versus being created?
Okay, technology versus humanity. What are your thoughts in terms of immunity, faith and humanity? We've got saving our planet, and then we had hospitals that he wants to change, but he's saying like, how the hell can I change so fast? He's going to disrupt the hell out of me. So, quick.
So I guess I'll pick the planet saving one and leave the others for
that was the easy one.
for my betters and maybe save them from having to answer the planet saving one. But I think. I really believe that improvements in communication have already made a massive difference to awareness of issues and the ability of people to seek feedback and deliver feedback, which has empowered customers, not customers, but people to express themselves better. And I think that's the beginning, right? So you cannot save the planet if you're ignorant. And now we're no longer ignorant. And I think subsequently, technology has given us the tools to become more productive if we choose to be more productive, and more efficient if we choose to be more efficient. Of course, those are not linear things. You could also become a slave to these things and become ignorant in a different way. But it's a choice, and the choice is increasing and expanding. Now the question is, what do we do with that choice? And that's up to us.
Super. Fadi, final words.
I think on the immune part, I think I answered earlier about how we've addressed it. With respect to the hospitals, I think it goes back to a lot of the earlier comments. If you're not going to be putting yourself in a position to cannibalize your business and reinvent yourself, someone will come and do it for you and drive you out. So there's just no way out. You just got to kind of jump in and do it. On the question about human and machine, our view, honestly, this is practical because we've got a data scientist and we've built machines that learn and operate. We see this as a man-machine kind of collaboration. We don't see it as somebody replacing somebody else or whatever. Most of the conversations that I have around the table with my underwriters and everybody is about, let's shift your intellect to something that's more challenging and let the robots do the mundane work. And that's kind of the conversation that we're having. On the planet, I don't have a good answer, but I could ensure anybody that has concerns about the future.
So I think you guys have answered everything, right? So I can, no, but just one point I want to reemphasize, because there's a lot of, I would say, buzzword and talk about is the AI going to take out the human species, right? And so on, and the ethics on that. So to me, and to the company I'm representing, so there is an amplification element of the new technology into the human part of it, but, and it's a big capital letters, but, when we implement, we develop AI into our core DNA of the company, there needs to be an ethical element into it, one. And then one of the things, and today there's nothing about that yet, we call it explainable AI. So we need to put, because the AI works with machine learning algorithms that basically feed back the inputs to the outputs and create this virtuous cycle eventually, or vicious, depending. And again, all what we're talking today is narrow AI. So we're not talking about the broad AI because this has not been just carved out, right? So there's a lot of tests, but it's not, and that's why when you see narrow AI being applied into different things that what has been trained for, it fails miserably. You can win a Go game out of training. And let me close here, but to me, AI needs to amplify, or any technology needs to amplify the human aspect of it, always for the best of the evolution, right?
Okay. Final word, yeah.
Okay, now where to start? So let me start with the easiest one, the immune system and the matrix structure. If you have an immune system, we've developed sprints, we have methodologies for that. Something that I talk to CEOs about when they have a classic matrix structure is that over time, all the legal, HR, finance, technology, etc., over time, the power accrues to the horizontal because they have no reason to say yes. It's really easy to say no, and everybody gets stuck, and it just clogs up the whole machinery. The advice that I've given, and the ones that have done this have succeeded very well, is to say every 3 years, blow up the horizontal layer and reinvent it from zero. Right? So you basically just chuck it out completely and restart it with new, the latest thinking, and you have some sense of it. And in the process, you'll re-architect the organization. So that's one. On the hospital side, to the point that Fadi was making, what you have to do, what I recommend is new technologies are profoundly amazing in terms of what the medical outcomes are. Focused ultrasound, for example. I'm advising a biotech company in LA that has solved superbugs. They can cure superbugs. And so now what you do is you set up, you can't integrate that into the normal hospital system because of the immune, you've got like, the only immune system worse than medical is academia, which is like the ultimate overdrive. So what you do is you set up clinics at the edge that deal with just those things and just little by little set the structure up that way over time. On the climate change one, we're really screwed, basically, because we will not solve it. We're going to have to use massive technological intervention, geoengineering at a global scale. I've lived in Miami the last 4 years deliberately because according to our numbers, in 15, 20 years, Miami's gone. So better enjoy it while it's there, was the thesis. The Middle East has a huge problem. The current projections are summer temperatures will end up at about 63, 64 degrees Celsius, which will make the entire region unlivable. So there's massive, massive issues coming. Don't have an easy answer for that, except to say let's set up the structures that will catch civilization as it falls over so that we don't end up with several centuries of dark ages. And on the question of faith and technology and AI and so on, I'll just touch on the faith part. You know, back in when most of our major religions were formed, we had no evidentiary basis for reaching conclusions, so we used faith as a belief structure to empower, to create moral imperatives, etc. And you look at the Greek philosophers; they were operating without an evidentiary basis to the world because they just didn't have the data. Now we have data, and so now we can inform ourselves and be very evidence-driven around how to navigate ourselves, and it becomes much more effective and much faster. Because faith-type structures, which rely on absolute truths, take a very, very long time to update themselves. Right? And so that challenge is, so now we can be evidence-driven. It would be interesting to see what would it be to have a faith structure that was evidence-based. And I'll just leave it there.
That is a very philosophical point. Absolutely brilliant. I'll just finish with what I started, which is trust, ethics, values. Those are amongst the core things that we need to be looking at as we go forward. Big hand to our core team here who've done a wonderful job. And now for the fortunate people who have stayed, we have also, may I please acknowledge Francisco, who is the co-author of the book that is out there. Francisco's here, and so is Salim, and both of them will be available to sign the books for you, so you guys can queue up there. Whoever gets there first gets it first. So, we'll see you as we go along. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.